Okay, so good morning. Then, so let me start with the introductory part. So, following up the information that I think you already know. So, since you have joined the Google Classroom, so the code is this. And if anyone has not joined of your friends, so just let them know. And so this is a one fractal course, so one credit course, and therefore the last class will be on 7th of February, and the exam will be on 12th of February. So we have only like 14 lectures, and we will cover some glimpses, or I will give a flavor of electronic materials during this 14 lectures. So the course content, so basically I will start with this classification of materials. So, so how you can classify different materials in terms of looking at the arrangement of atoms or molecules, and as well as classification of materials based on their properties. So that will basically lead us to the understanding of difference between metal, semiconductor, and insulators. And then we will also look at what is band structure, particularly how the electronic levels in a material, they play an important role in determining the properties of materials. And we will basically focus on the electronic properties. So because there can be properties like you can have magnetic properties, you can have optical properties, you can have thermal properties, but we will be focusing on the electrical or electronic properties of the material. And if you look at the electronic materials, so primarily what is used is semiconductor materials. And therefore we will look at the physics of this semiconductor materials and what properties normally uh, we would consider, or we would be looking at during if we want to use these materials for some devices or for some applications. So in this context, so the well-known semiconductor material that is actually used a lot in the industry is silicon. So of course there are many others, so like germanium, some alloys, and heterostructures, and we will look at how they are different or similar to each other. And then finally, we will look at the material, and then we go into the certain devices. So probably you must have some introduction to the semiconductor devices like diode, transistors, uh, field effect transistors, MOSFET. I mean, do you have already idea about the semiconductor devices? Can anyone tell? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, like all these, like what did you know about these devices? I want to know what is the background actually. So diode, like PN junction, and their IV characteristic, all these you know.
Yes, sir.
Transistors,
Yes,
okay.
sir.
And even this MOSFET,
No, not MOSFET.
not MOSFET, okay. Yeah, we will. So these are like different kinds of transistors. So we will have an introduction to some of these devices, since you already have idea about diode and transistors, and maybe we will also look at a little bit of physics, what is going on behind this PN junction and PNP transistor. So you know the electrical characteristic, or let's say the IV characteristic, and maybe the uh, capacitance and voltage CV characteristic of these devices. and maybe you know about how you can make electronic circuits using these building blocks. But the physics, what is going on in terms of the material, we will look at that. And of course, that leads to the this assembling these components into a form, something we call it integrated circuits, and we will look at so some of the other materials that are being used in IC fabrication. So primarily the focus will be on semiconductor materials and their physical properties and chemical properties, and basically how these semiconductors can be assembled into or what like how the properties lead to this different behaviors in terms of like diode or transistors, or so FET is, for example, stands for field effect transistor. So MOSFET stands for metal oxide semiconductor field effect transistor. So already you see the development already captures the idea what is the importance of materials in these devices. So metal, metal has like a conductor. So oxide is typically like an insulator, and again there is a semiconductor. So how you put these metal and insulator and semiconductor together to make a device or a transistor, which actually right now is one of the highest produced electronic component in the world. So if you look at any IC, so it is basically contains millions of this MOSFET. And then, but there is always definitely some limitations with these materials, and what now people are looking at like electronic materials which are much more robust and maybe faster in terms of their operation. So when we talk about semiconductor devices, their operation, so we always talk about the flow of electron or holes. Okay, so we will look at these concepts as well. So electron, you all know, and holes are nothing but a missing electron. Okay, so behaves very similar to an electron, and holes are actually can only exist within a solid material. So you cannot have a free hole in a like you have a free electron in nature. Okay, so holes, they only exist in the semiconductor or basically in solid states. So but there are still many limitations which one needs to overcome if you want to make your device faster. And in that context, so now people are talking about a lot of nanostructured materials, how you can tune or make the device smaller and smaller, so and use maybe different materials other than this silicon or typical semiconductor materials like silicon, germanium, or maybe some heterostructures. So in that context, probably you have heard of graphene, so which is like a two-dimensional material, and how this material, and there are now many more 2D materials as well. So we will spend, so not more, but maybe a couple of lectures on this future electronic materials. So the textbooks which I will be following, so this is to tell you this subject is really vast, and we will capture most of the essence in 14 lectures. And therefore, I will be, so these are the typical books which I will be following. So primarily the first one, this Principles of Electronic Materials and Devices by S.O. Kasap. So this will be the primary textbook I will be following. So all of you should get a copy of this. So you can download it online and have this book. So most of the materials that I will share in the lecture are from this book. And similarly, so some concepts I will also take from, so the first one and the fourth one. Fourth one is also quite interesting. I mean, I found it recently. This is, again, a recent book, but written in a very concise way. So a lot of things are there, but nicely explained. But the first one and fourth one should be like, you should have these two books. The other two books, if you can have, it is good. Otherwise, if I take any content from there, so I will share that PDF content with you in the Google Classroom. So if I use any of the concepts from these two books or any material, I will share that in the Google Classroom. But the other two books, you should get it. You should download it and have them with you. Okay, so the next is the evaluation criteria. The evaluation criteria is like I will have two quizzes. So the first one will be in the online mode, like a Google form. The second one will be like a pen and paper based quiz. Then there will be a home assignment. Then there will be a group project presentation and Viva. So I will just discuss that next. And then the end fractal will be 35%. So the quiz is in total 35. Then assignment will be 15, and this project presentation and Viva will be 15, and the end fractal will be 35. So the group project and the Viva would be like, so I will create a group of 5 students. So I will share the group in the Google Classroom in the Excel sheet. And the project basically will be, so all 5 the group members should work together on a topic which is basically in the emerging electronic materials. So you can choose the electronic material that you want to present. So for example, as I said, 2D materials like graphene, or so there are many other 2D materials like molybdenum disulfide. Okay, so there is phosphorus, black phosphorus, which is also a 2D material, or any other emerging material which is not silicon. So most of the electronic materials are based on silicon, but what I want is you choose a topic where the material is not silicon, and then you discuss so that what kind of applications that 2D materials will have in some device form. And basically you have to highlight the material properties that is important for the device application. So which material properties you think makes it suitable or better compared to silicon in that application. And so the topic, so once I create the group, you can think about the topic discussed within the group and finalize the topic and upload it in Google Classroom by 16th of January. So I will share the Excel sheet with the group. So maybe by Friday I will do that. And then you can discuss amongst yourself and find out the project topic. But the evaluation will be actually you have to present. So it will be again a group presentation. So the presentation will be for 7 minutes on the topic that you have chosen. And we will have most likely, we will have the presentation will schedule on 4th, 5th and 6th of February. So in the afternoon time, so this we will communicate later. And so basically your presentation time will be 7 minutes, and then we will have some discussion and question answers. And also you need to submit a report. Maximum should be 10 pages, so not more than that, on the same topic that you have presented. And you have to upload that report in Google Classroom by 20th of February. So I give a little bit of time after your end sem or end fractal exam, so which is on 12th. So this will be, so you can submit, you have 1 week, and you can submit the report by 20th of February. You can upload that. So this component will carry basically the this 15 marks, and it is again a group activity. Okay, so this is the evaluation. Yeah, okay. Any question before we go further? From the evaluation or anything from the course content or anything? How many of you are here in the campus? Anyone? Okay. Mhm. Yes. Okay. Yes, I think that, yes, quiz 2 will be offline. Let me see this. There are a couple of. So yeah, what is the question? I think there are a couple of questions. Some people raised the hands. Let's see that again. Yes, you have any question? You can ask. Topics will be shared or we can present on any to-do material. Yes, the topic will be, so you decide the topic and the kind of device application that you want to, this is up to you what topic you will choose. So, but it should have this 2D material as the main, the primary device material, and then it should also present some device application of that material. Quiz 2 will be offline, yes. Yes, it will be like, we'll just upload the questions, and then you just have to solve it on pen and paper and upload it in the Google Classroom. Ah, okay, sorry, yeah, okay, so you raised hand because you were in campus. Okay, okay, fine, fine, fine. Okay, yeah, any other question? Okay, not, so let's then, so I will anyway share this slide so you have the, you can keep these things in mind as well. Okay. Yeah, so let's start with some introduction today. So what is electronic material and why we should learn about it? So what do you think, like, can you give any example of an electronic material that you have or any devices where electronic material is used in your day-to-day life. To anyone, what do you have any examples?
Sir, laptops.
Like what is the electronic device or the component that is used?
Silicon
Transistors,
chips.
Silicon
IC.
chips. IC, okay. So what is the role of an IC in a laptop?
Individual components will occupy too much space and they don't offer that much complexity.
No, what the IC does. I mean, why do you have a IC in a laptop? Anyone?
So to accommodate a very big circuit in a limited space.
Ah, okay. To complete a circuit. Like, why do you need a circuit in the first place? I mean,
Sir, to communicate information for processing and stuff.
yes. So you need to basically you in your laptop or even in your mobile devices, in any electronic devices, you want to have some basic operation you always do, right? Not basic. I mean nowadays all the advanced operations you do, and to execute those operations, so you need these transistors. And they are basically like, you can think of it's like I think in the computer language probably you already know that you have to perform arithmetics, okay, or you have to perform some logical steps. So all these are performed, like you have or, and, nor, like different kind of logical uh, operations you do, and those can be performed by these transistors. And you don't have only one transistor to perform that, because you want to execute a lot of operation at the same time, and for that you need lots of transistors, and that's why you want to pack as many transistors as possible in one single in a small silicon chip, where the or in the same volume, so the number of, if you can increase the number of transistors, so you can actually increase the performance of that IC chip. And that is why these ICs, I like you see in every electronic component. But when you look at, so there can be two things. One is like, as probably as computer science students, and like I working in AI and data science, so you would be always working with data, and writing codes and so on. But a fundamental understanding of what is the physics that is going behind that is always good, because when you go, like when you go into higher studies in future, so most likely a basic understanding of semiconductor properties will be very helpful in your career. So it is something like, you can, so in programming, I think many of you must have done programming in terms of developing apps, where you work on a front end and the back end, right? And here in the semiconductor industry, so like when you are given a laptop or any device, electronic device, so you are only interacting with what you are seeing, but what is going underneath, or maybe you are interacting with the machine using a language which you are learning. So there are many computer languages, programming languages, which you are learning, or you will be learning over time, and you will be communicating with that. But then there is another language which actually is very fundamental and quite simple. And that language is the language of the materials, how they communicate with you, or basically your like the devices. Okay, so how they communicate, so it is based on basically the physics, and that is, if you know, and in terms of the physics, it is very simple. Okay, so and we will be looking at those concepts in this course, and basically they will not change at all the physics of that, like what parameters, like if we are talking about materials, so what are the parameters that actually will define or determine the device performance, so that those parameters normally don't change. So you probably play with the materials, or you play with the materials means it had some arrangement of atoms, it had some electronic structure, and how this electronic structure leads to these different parameters. So to give an example, so if I say a copper as a material, okay, so this is a conductor, right? So why it is conducting? Why it is a conductor? Anyone has any idea? On the other hand, if you have carbon, or let's say not carbon, let's say if you have a glass, so it is an insulator. So why copper is conductor and glass is insulator?
Sir, band gap.
Band gap. So you are saying, so what is the role of band gap?
Free electrons.
So where do you have free electrons and where you don't have free electrons, and how free electrons are responsible for conductivity? So you are correct. So you have free electrons in copper, okay? But why these free electrons? Where do they come from? So why you don't have the free electrons in silicon dioxide, or let's say in glass? So that comes due to the electronic structure, okay, or the how the electrons or the energy levels that are you have in the material. Now, if you look at a copper atom, just take a simple copper atom. So it had certain electronic configuration, but it doesn't have any free electron. Okay. But when you talk about a copper as a material, as a metal or a solid, so that has a free electron, and then you have conductivity in copper. So you know, you have a basic understanding of the atomic structure, the energy levels, but how that leads to energy, and they have discrete energy levels, but how that leads to a energy band, so that is where all the electrical properties come from. So we will look at some of those concepts. And then you can actually distinguish between, so a class of material, like what I said, copper, a metal or a conductor. Then you have glass, which is an insulator. And then you have a semiconductor, which is again partially conducting. So depends on, so the something which is which has a conductivity in between a metal and an insulator. So some of those concepts we will look at how one can go from atoms, where you have discrete energy levels, to a solid where you have these bands, and how these bands describe the electronic or electrons motion. Now, so the subtle connection, what you see here is on one end you have one atom, and the other end you have like many atoms. So many in the terms maybe like 10 to the power 23 atoms. Okay, so like if you consider one mole and like of the order of like Avogadro's number, so the number of atoms can be fused. Okay, so one independent atom, and there are on the other hand you have this 10 to the power 23 or 10 to the power 22 atoms which are interacting, and that is how they will determine what is the electronic structure of that material would be. And therefore, I think a basic and so this basic energy distribution, or how the energy levels are in a material, so will determine most of its properties actually. So when we talk about electronic properties, so most of its properties will come from this, how the band structure is. Although we will not really go into the detail of how the bands form, so I will describe it briefly, giving a qualitative idea without really going into the mathematics of it. But we will look at qualitatively how these bands are formed and how they and what is their role in the electronic properties, as well as many of the optical properties as well. So you can actually combine electronic and optical properties together if you understand the band structure. Okay, so now, as I mentioned, we were discussing, so in every electronic device, so you take a laptop or your mobile or a camera, or nowadays even in your TV screens, the smart TV and everything. So you have basically some microprocessor or a chip, or maybe a central CPU, so which is like the brain of the computing. Okay, so this is a picture of a microprocessor that is from Intel. So they look quite similar from other companies as well. And when you look at the basic architecture, so what you have is your CPU will be performing maybe this arithmetic and logic operations, and maybe some registers or some control units, and then you have the input and output devices through which you communicate with these with CPU, because though they are basically working in they only understand the binary code. So you communicate to them using this language where they can understand these binary codes. And then maybe they will also communicate with the memory where you store the information. So they collect the information from the memory and then perform certain tasks that you have asked them to perform. And after performing, so they will give you a result, which will again be stored in the memory or will be given to an output device. So this is the basic architecture of your a microprocessor or a CPU in simple computer language. But what we will be looking at how these this black box, let's say the CPU, what it is made up of and how it performs these operations. So now if you open actually this integrated circuit, okay, so what you see here is the top cap is kind of removed. So it is not that easy normally. So you see these IC chips, okay, so coming with this plastic cover, but it is not that easy to break it, okay. But if you break it, so what you will see is something like this. So what you see, these are all metallic connections, okay. So these are all metallic connections, these are all metallic connections. But what you see here within this red circle, this square here, this is basically the silicon chip on which you have all these transistors. And a modern chip will have like probably millions of transistors on it, interconnected, performing all these tasks, what is like it intends to do. So there is actually a famous law which was proposed by Gordon Moore. It's known as Moore's law. I think it was in 1960, around 1960. So what he proposed, or the law says, or what he observed actually. So he was like one of the co-founder of Intel Corporation, if you have heard of it. So like most of you in the laptops, what you use is an Intel chip. And so he was one of the co-founders. So what he said, that the number of transistors on a chip will be increasing or will double every 1 or 2 years. Okay, so that is what he predicted, and he predicted it for only 10 years. Okay, but then it has been observed that his Moore's law actually holds good till now. Now, if you see in the x-axis, you have the year, so now it's up to 2020, and in the y-axis, you have the number of transistors. And what you see is in the y-axis, it is actually a straight line, almost looks like a straight line, but actually it is plotted in a logarithmic scale. So it is 10,000, 100,000, 1 million, 10 million. So it is in a logarithmic scale. And that means the number of actually the transistors increases exponentially every once or twice a year. So which is still happening. And that is really very surprising. But engineers have found a way so they can still continue with this trend. But definitely there will be a point, or there already is a point, where this is not going to be, so there will be a discrepancy will happen maybe in a couple of years or maybe 5 years. And therefore, people are looking at some materials beyond silicon. So till now, all the chips that or transistors that is being fabricated is based on silicon. And this trend still holds good when you are using silicon. But then there will be a time when silicon will not be able to, or you cannot pack as many transistors as possible on a silicon chip. And at that point, probably one has to look at different material other than silicon. But silicon is still now the leading material, and we will see, like, so maybe some point I will tell you about why silicon is the most important semiconductor material actually. But this law kind of is like a challenge for engineers to keep up with this law. So people are trying to, our industries are trying to find different ways how they can pack these transistors, and basically you can improve the performance or operation of a chip. So basically you have more number of transistors means you can perform many more operations much faster and quicker, and that is the thing what you want actually. So you can do a large number of computation parallelly at a great speed, as long as you have a lot of transistors in a chip, one single chip. And that is why they are trying to increase the number of chips or number of transistors on a single chip. Yeah, so that's the Moore's law. So the number of transistors on a chip doubles every 1 or 2 years. And if you, so I'll just give a little bit of history of this. So So the first transistor was like demonstrated in 1947 by Bardeen and Brattain. So they were working in Bell Labs in United States, and the first one was based on germanium. Okay, and then this in immediately in 1948 this bipolar junction transistor by Shockley was invented, and it was based on a silicon device. And during those 1950s, it was clear that semiconductor and these transistors will be playing an important role in information technology or in computation. So at that time, it was not information technology, but mostly in computation it was used, and people were really aware that this is going to be the best thing to happen for this computer industry. And then so there were many developments were happening, research that was happening in semiconductor industries and many other labs around the world, but mostly it was in US that was kind of commercialized in the scale that we see now today. And then the first IC was fabricated using these transistors in 1959. So it was done independently by Kilby and Noyce. So both were like working in two different companies, and they came up with this how you can pack many transistors into one single chip and then use it for some reliable operation. So they demonstrated that, and both were working in two different companies, Kilby and Noyce. And later on, Noyce, who joined Gordon Moore, and they found the Intel Corporation together. And in the same time, so a lot of development was happening in semiconductor devices in terms of their fabrication. So in the same year, 1959, around that time, this MOSFET, this metal oxide semiconductor, the field effect transistor was first invented. So the concept was known, but people were not able to demonstrate that, yes, we can make such a device. But it was demonstrated in invented in 1959. And the interesting part here in the MOSFET, like as a device, was it happened by accident actually. So the oxide layer, so nobody like was thinking, okay, if you put an oxide layer on top of a semiconductor, and then probably you can use it as a transistor. So I think two scientists, I forgot the name, so they were working in a lab, and they found they accidentally oxidized, so they were working with silicon, and they accidentally oxidized silicon. And they didn't know that, and then they kept on studying the IV characteristic and so on. And they observed a very peculiar IV characteristic in this device. And then they looked thoroughly, and they found out that because of this oxide layer, so this device is giving some very different behavior than typical transistor behavior. And that's why, and then they kept on investigating further, and then people came to know that even this kind of device structure will be very useful compared to a simple bipolar junction transistor. Okay, so somehow this oxide, which is nowadays used deliberately, was because of some accident which happened in 1950s. And these works actually has led to this couple of Nobel Prizes in physics. So the 1956 Nobel Prize in Physics was awarded to Bardeen, Brattain, and Shockley for the invention of transistors. And then for the IC, the Nobel Prize was awarded in 2000, so quite recently, to Kilby, because by that time Noyes he was dead by that time. And normally Nobel Prize is given to people who are like alive. So it is not given if you have passed away. Even if your work is acknowledged, but you may not get a Nobel Prize if you are not alive. So there are a lot of history which is very interesting to look at when you look at the development of these semiconductor devices. So I will just conclude and we will carry forward with this classification of materials and how we can distinguish between different materials in terms of their structure and in terms of their properties. So there are two aspects you can look at and then distinguish or classify these materials. So when you look at the arrangement of atoms, so you know you can arrange them in a regular periodic arrangement, so which is known as a crystal, or they can be arranged in a random way, so which will be non-crystalline, or mostly you will call it an amorphous material. So you can have a crystalline material and amorphous material. And the crystalline material can be a single crystal. So that means over the entire, if you take the whole material, so all the atoms are arranged in really periodic and regular order. Okay, so this is like a single crystal. But there are many materials, and most of the materials are actually not single crystal. It is not that easy to grow. You actually obtain something known as a polycrystalline material. So polycrystalline material means it is like there are regions where atomic arrangement is in certain direction or certain orientation, so with certain atomic planes, and then this orientation will change, the atomic arrangement will change. However, there is always you still have this long range arrangement of the atoms. So these are the polycrystalline material. And so therefore you have these are called like grains, and then you have certain boundary, which is the difference between two grains or two atomic arrangement, and that is how you get a polycrystalline material. And of course, in the amorphous material, so you don't have any regular arrangement of the atoms, and then you have so it's like for example, glass. So single crystal like silicon can be in a single crystal form, and you can also get it in a polycrystalline form. Okay, so you can get both silicon in both forms. So how you grow it, how you so there are ways to synthesize or grow this silicon material, so you can get a single crystal or a polycrystal. But that will actually determine also a lot of properties of the material. Okay, so then another classification is based on the properties or the functions that they do. So functional properties. So as I said, so depending on the application, so let's say they can be magnetic, they can be semiconducting, or they can be like optical properties. So there are also dielectric or ferroelectric properties. Okay, so a lot of different functionalities that you can give to a material, and then you can also distinguish based on those properties. So we will look at these two classifications, how what are the different atomic arrangements one can have, and how so this is basically you can say the structure of the material. So one is the structure, and then the other part is the functional properties. Okay, so we will look at those two aspects. So primarily we will look at the electronic properties, as I said in the beginning, and we will try to understand how these electronic properties they arise, and what roles they play uh, in most of this, many of the devices that we will come across uh, in next coming weeks. Okay, any question? Okay, so what is grain? Yes, yeah, the valence band and conduction band. Yes, we will also talk about that. The overlap in conduction band and yeah, so this energy gap concept we will consider. So what is grain? So grain is okay. I will show it in the next class. So some pictures, so it will be then clear. So if I explain right now, it will be difficult. So I will present some. So I will start with this description. Grain boundaries. So what is a polycrystalline material? Okay. If I show a picture, it will be much easier for you to understand. Yes, so I will share the slides, but recording I will not. For first couple of lectures, maybe I will share the recordings, but later on, I will not share the recordings. So what I would suggest, so if you want to note down something in the class, so you keep a notebook and a pen with you, so you can note down things. I will share the slides. Yes, I will share the slides. Okay, anything else? Why can't we have the recording? Yeah, because I want you to pay attention in the class. And also I would insist that you should read books as well. So I have suggested those books. So read those books. So that will be very useful because many of the concepts that we will discuss in the class, it's not like there is not enough time. So to understand it better, you should read the book. At least this Eso Kasap, the first one, you should have it. Yes, I said no slides. I will share. Okay. Okay, so then thank you. So we will meet then tomorrow at the same time, and we will start with this properties or classification of materials and their properties. Okay, thank you.